the man, the mind, and the brain that refused to die. What if the most powerful brain in human history never truly came to rest? What if the mind that bent time, space, and reality itself did not fade quietly into the past, but instead began a second, darker journey after death? What if genius was never about raw intelligence at all, but about discomfort, obsession, and a lifelong refusal to accept the world exactly as it appears? This is not just the story of Albert Einstein. It is the story of what happened after his final breath, and why his brain continues to haunt science, ethics, and our understanding of human potential. Stay with this story, because it doesn't simply reveal facts. It slowly pulls apart one of the most powerful myths humanity has ever created. April 17th, 1955, Princeton, New Jersey. Albert Einstein was 76 years old when his body finally turned against him. In the early hours of the morning, a sudden and violent pain tore through his chest and abdomen, forcing him to seek emergency care. He was rushed to Princeton Hospital, where doctors quickly realized the situation was critical. The diagnosis: an abdominal aortic aneurysm, a silent and deadly condition that often goes unnoticed until it is too late. The aorta, the largest artery in the human body, had swollen dangerously, like an overstretched balloon. Its walls had weakened over time. Now, it had ruptured. Internal bleeding had already begun. There was no dramatic countdown, no hopeful window. Death was not a possibility hovering in the distance. It was already unfolding inside him. The doctors had only one option to offer: immediate surgery, complex, invasive, and extremely risky, especially for a man of Einstein's age. Even if it succeeded, recovery would be long, painful, and uncertain. They explained everything carefully, hoping the greatest scientific mind of the 20th century would choose to fight for more time. Einstein listened calmly. He asked questions. He understood the probabilities. And then, he refused. Not because he feared death, but because he rejected artificial prolongation. Years earlier, he had undergone a similar operation and knew exactly what such survival demanded: suffering without purpose, existence without dignity. For Einstein, life had always been about meaning, not duration. He looked at the doctors and delivered a sentence that would echo long after his death. "I want to go when I want. It is tasteless to prolong life artificially. I have done my share. It is time to go. I will do it elegantly." Even at the end, Einstein chose simplicity over fear, acceptance over resistance. Early the next morning, he slipped into unconsciousness. A few hours later, he was gone. The man who redefined the universe had quietly exited it. The world mourned. Newspapers printed headlines. Scientists grieved. Humanity believed the story had ended, but it hadn't. 7 hours after Einstein's death, a decision was made that would permanently stain the history of science. In the cold, silent morgue of Princeton Hospital stood Dr. Thomas Stoltz Harvey, the hospital's chief pathologist, a trained physician, sworn to ethics, procedure, and restraint. That night, restraint disappeared. Without permission from Einstein's family, and in direct violation of Einstein's explicit wish to be cremated anonymously, Harvey performed the autopsy and removed Einstein's brain. No cameras, no press, no consent. Just a scalpel, a jar, and a belief that history would forgive him. Harvey convinced himself that he was acting in the name of science, that humanity deserved access to the physical source of genius, that future generations would thank him for preserving what nature had created only once. He injected the brain with a 10% formalin solution, carefully preserving it. He photographed it, measured it, and then sliced it into hundreds of sections. Einstein had wanted his ashes scattered in secret, precisely to avoid becoming a relic. Instead, his brain was turned into one. The violation did not stop there. Harvey also removed Einstein's eyes, not for scientific research, but as a personal gesture. He gave them to Einstein's ophthalmologist, Henry Abrams. When the family discovered what had happened, shock turned into outrage. Legal threats followed. Ethical lines were crossed beyond repair. Eventually, under intense pressure, Einstein's son, Hans Albert Einstein, granted retroactive permission. But it came with strict conditions. The research had to be purely scientific. The findings had to be published in respected journals. There could be no profit, no spectacle, no mythology. Harvey agreed. He promised results within a year. That promise would destroy his life. Instead of becoming famous, Thomas Harvey became isolated. He lost his position at Princeton. His professional reputation collapsed. His marriage fell apart. Yet, he never returned the brain. For decades, Harvey drifted across the American Midwest, taking low-level medical jobs, living quietly, always carrying pieces of Einstein's brain with him. At one point, the samples were stored in 2 glass jars, placed inside a simple cider box, hidden beneath a beer cooler in a basement. The most valuable organ in human history, forgotten and misplaced. Nearly 40 years passed before modern neuroscientists were finally allowed to study it seriously. When they did, their expectations were simple. They expected a massive brain. They were wrong. The average adult male brain weighs around 1,400 grams. Einstein's weighed only 1,230 grams. Smaller than average. Possibly smaller than yours. In a single measurement, the idea that intelligence equals size collapsed. But the true revelation came not from weight, but from structure. Einstein's parietal lobe, the region responsible for spatial reasoning, mathematical abstraction, and conceptual visualization, was approximately 15% wider than normal. Other regions appeared compressed, as if his brain had sacrificed space elsewhere to fuel abstract thought. In the motor cortex, researchers found a distinct ridge known as the omega sign, associated with fine motor control of the left hand. This was the physical imprint of a lifetime spent playing the violin. Thousands of hours of music had reshaped his brain. In the language-associated Brodmann Area 39, Einstein had a lower density of neurons. This aligned perfectly with historical accounts. He had been a late talker, not speaking fluently until around the age of 6. Einstein's mind was visual long before it was verbal. He once explained that he rarely thought in words. There was no inner monologue narrating his thoughts. Instead, ideas appeared as images, physical sensations, mathematical relationships, and musical structures. When calculations stalled, he did not reach for paper. He reached for his violin. Music was not a distraction. It was a cognitive tool. Einstein searched for beauty in physics, elegance, symmetry, harmony. If a theory felt ugly or forced, he distrusted it. This aesthetic intuition led him to general relativity, one of the most beautiful theories ever created, but it also became his weakness. When quantum mechanics emerged, unpredictable and probabilistic, Einstein rejected it. God does not play dice, he famously said. History proved him wrong. The same filter that fueled his genius eventually limited it. So, the final question remains. Was Einstein born this way? Partially. The folds of the cortex are shaped early in life, suggesting a biological advantage, but many of his most extraordinary features were built, trained, reinforced. This is neuroplasticity. The brain is not static. It reshapes itself around obsession, around focus, around what we repeatedly choose to think about. Einstein's genius was not locked in a jar. It was practiced daily. Even while working a dull job at a patent office, Einstein never wanted monuments. He never wanted worship. He never wanted relics. And yet, his stolen brain became all three. But the real lesson was never in the tissue. It was in the process. Genius is not comfort. It is friction. It is curiosity that refuses to be silenced. And right now, your brain is becoming something